First of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody. This is everything has been put together. To the good offices of Southern Boone County School District and Mid-Mount RPC. So I want to thank those folks first. Also wanted to thank Representative Sarah Walsh. We all know Steve has recently passed. She was instrumental in putting this together as well. She was originally part of this committee, and then she stepped off to do some other things. Everybody here could have a moment of silence for Steve, one of the true class people we will ever know in this life. Go ahead, take a moment of silence now. Thank you. And services for Steve are this coming Saturday. Some more details with me, but I know most of us here want to be there for that. I want to thank Sarah, even though she's not with us this evening, for her assistance on this. This committee basically on broadband development was put together as the speaker for 4 interim committees. He said, pick one. So for me, it was a no-brainer. It's going to be broadband. It's the one thing that touches, concerns everything we do. It involves us in online education, it involves us in telemedicine, it involves us in business, it involves us in everything. And one thing COVID taught us, it was where the holes are in the system and how much we need broadband more than ever. So Travis Fitzwater is a member of that committee as well. And we've got some other state reps here this evening. Thank you all for coming out. The purpose of these town halls is to sit down and hear from people who are out there doing it and people out there who are dealing with it. So we start these basically in 3 parts. The first portion is where are we? The second portion is where do we need to be, not want to be, need to be. And the third part is how do we get from here to there? What action steps can we do? So the first one of these we had was in Palmyra, my district, June 11th. We sat down, we've done these before. COVID interrupted us last year, but we got it done this year. The action step we decided to take was we need a steering committee, regional. And we've already met twice, and it'll be the 3rd time. What we decided was we need universal access. We need folks in the elected space, we need folks at the provider space, we need folks in the business space. We need people basically from every walk of life in the middle of this process before we need today. Now, between the time we set this up and between the time we got here, the governor was kind enough to announce $400 million. We had $250 million on the table. He upped the ante on that considerably. Thank you, Governor Parson. But as we say in Jersey City Hall, it's subject to appropriation. The governor can ask all he wants for. It's up to us as legislators to figure out what to do with it. So it was very encouraging. I do want to put a plug in for our state broadband office. To date, the return on investment for the money that he spent in state fund is 7 to 1. The national standard is $3.50 to $4 per one. So our follow-on investment as a state fund is twice the national average. That's by design. It's not an adversarial process. We're actually out there trying to get that real last mile provider engaged. The smallest grant that's gone out from that program is $25,000. These are matching funds. This isn't free money. You have to have skin in the game to get at it. So we've seen the demonstrated value of that fund. We are confident that we can get something upwards of 250 million, hopefully upwards of 400 million after it's all said and done, to take out of the ARPA money and get that into the state broadband fund. There was another couple of funds that they were looking at as well to supplement that. Then it talks to a few folks about how we can take some of the federal dollars that aren't stable to other things and put more into the broadband fund. So these discussions are continuous, they're ongoing. It's what's happening in Jefferson City. What's happening out here in God's country is we're sitting down talking to real people about real issues right now. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this thing over. Travis, you want to take a turn to the mic? Let's go ahead and do some introductions, and I'll just hand the mic off. We'll just keep handing the mic off until we're all done.
Hey everybody, glad to be here. Well, Travis Fitzwater, I'm a state representative in Missouri. I'm next door in Caldwell County and a little bit of Jeff City. Really thankful for Lewis for doing all the work that he's done. It's really helpful on this issue to have somebody that's as passionate, kind of leading in the House to to connect all the dots, to have these hearings, to come up with a policy that we think is appropriate in the legislature, and to try to discuss with the governor whether we agree, like you mentioned, on the appropriation level, whether that's a good amount to put into the system. I think we all are here because we have an interest in expanding broadband. That's been a passion of mine. It's something I hear in my district often, is how do we get those last few people, Cowley County in particular, that don't have access to good internet, that need it, especially in a pandemic world where people are working from home, they're being forced to be at home, they need access to the internet. Also, from my perspective, broadband expansion is crucial for entrepreneurship. The further you expand broadband opportunities, the more entrepreneurs you create. It offers them opportunities to build businesses in their homes, to have access to modern technology. It's really, really important for our economic development issues and needs in the state, is to have an expanded broadband system. So I'm glad to be here, glad to be on the committee, the interim committee with Lewis, who's done a great job again, leading that committee, and a lot of really good folks on that committee that are also committed to figuring out how do we do it intelligently, not just throw money at the problem, but how do we really expand broadband in a way that makes sense? How do we create some competition in the marketplace? And but how do we also make sure that we're spending those dollars appropriately, not just throwing cash at the problem? And I think that's the biggest thing, because technology is changing so swiftly, innovation is happening. So throwing money at it sounds like a lot of fun, but we've got to be smart with those dollars, because they're not just continual dollars that we're going to have every year. And so we need to be intelligent about it. So again, appreciate what Lewis is doing, and the speaker who has Speaker Rob Muscova, who's an agency prior to himself as well. So I'm just glad to be here.
Well, my name is Tim Taylor, Cooper County, Howard County, across the river from here. I'm here just like you all with as many questions, and I have very few answers. So this is why I'm taking notes. It's important. We had a really good discussion, and then Charlie and I did on the drive over here about how this money is going to be, what kind of oversight it's going to have on it, and make sure that this money doesn't fall through the cracks. And I'm one of those people who lives in an island that has no high-speed internet. So how am I going to ensure that people like me aren't bypassed and lost? I was there the day the governor made the announcement at the press, and I leaned over and said, well, let's just see how many years it takes to get it at my house. So words are good. I hope that it pans out, and we live up to that. So yeah, I'm gonna have as many questions, but I think these gentlemen, it's discussed all the time as capital has been and continue to be. So thanks.
Hi, I'm State Representative Cherie Tolson Reich. I represent all of Northeast Boone and Southeast Randolph County. My district is kind of unique, and the Columbia part of it has great internet. But if you've ever heard of the Stanton Brother egg farmers that are just outside of Centralia, they have no internet. And they have to drive to McDonald's in Centralia to get on their laptops and do all their business and everything, all their emails, send and receive and everything. So it's hard on our businesses. But I think we learned from COVID last year. I'll give you the example of my grandchildren. They go to a small school south of Lake of the Ozarks. They literally live in the middle of nowhere, and you can't get there from here. And they get no cell service at their home. It's been a family farm that's been there in the family over 100 years. And we even tried to get a landline from CenturyLink just to have a telephone for emergencies. My one granddaughter had asthma and had an attack at school, and they couldn't reach my son and daughter-in-law. They called me clear up in Hallsville that she had a medical emergency. And so I had to Facebook message them, and they finally got the message. But when CenturyLink tried to install them a landline for emergencies, even though we're talking about broadband here, this all ties in, the lines and the poles were probably over 80 years old, and there was no good service, even for telephone. So not only are we talking broadband internet, there's people in Missouri that can't even get phone service. And so when COVID hit my grandchildren's school last year, They had to do everything on a Chromebook, no internet. So my daughter-in-law had to drive them to Camdenton Public Library and park in the parking lot to do homework. I also in Randolph County could tell you the Randolph County Library had children all around Randolph County drove to the library parking lot to do their homework. Now, last summer, the governor came to my district, and some of y'all may know the company named Socket. It's located north of I-70. And so there was some grant monies given, and we did get some expansions here in Boone County and some other areas. But the weirdest thing happened in my hometown with internet. We had two companies, CenturyLink, which I had, and then our cable company, Provincial, also offered internet, and my son had them. We were both happy customers. All of a sudden, Sheridan Valley and Socket start making and varying high-speed internet. A little town of 2,000 people had 4 internet providers. Why? When people had 0 out in the country. Finally, competition, capitalism, or whatever ran the one company out of business. And probably CenturyLink is going downhill in Hallsville. So anyway, it was an opposite problem on why were they giving us so much internet when so many people had no internet. Thank you for coming.
And I think we've got field microphone over here. I'm going to go ahead and do a little more introductions. I want to thank Senator Bernstein for coming out this evening. We also have State Representative Rudy Deep, who's being bashful for once in his life. Chuck Basie, Roller Hay, anybody on this? That's got it. We'll go ahead, turn back, and we'll do basically do introductions to folks here in the crowd, and we'll go ahead and talk to folks on Zoom. And we'll do a little focus as far as discussion of where are we at this point in time. So go ahead. Thank you.
Folks, my name is Chris Bellamy. I'm the superintendent with the Southern School District. It's an honor to host you tonight. Thank you for taking time to come out and learn more and ask questions about this important concept of internet and the lack thereof. Does anyone have any questions? Would like to speak?
When I first got internet, when we lived in Columbia, I got an email address. That was probably 25 years ago. I still got it. And I called them trying to get them to put in fiber optic. We're just 2 miles south of town here. We're using a dish right now for our internet. And of course, as soon as it starts raining, that cuts out. It's expensive and slow, other than that, it's good. And I just don't know any way to contact them to say, hey, why don't you come in? I've made up a map that I'd like to get to them. Within a half mile of me, half mile of Highway 63, there are actually 26 residential properties. None of them have a high-speed internet. And I'm not sure how many properties per mile they have to make it worthwhile to run a line. But I don't know who to contact there. Do you folks have any idea who I can contact at one of the internet providers?
So I look at Brent Stewart.
I think Socket, I've seen ads, they've got a website that says, if you're interested in coming to your neighborhood, here's the information you need, and we'll come talk to you and all of that. But I'm not with Socket, but I've seen that on the internet.
And we had done that. I've contacted all of our neighbors and yeah.
I've done it online,
They won't respond.
well, they're not in our area, they're not in our area, that's right.
Well, we're just a half mile off Highway 63. On the other side of the Highway 63, I understand they have fiber optic cable run over there. And, it doesn't seem like it'd be a big problem for an underground cable underneath, like I said. They seem very reluctant to do it. I got another question. We're on Amarillo electric service. Amarillo is the telephone with electric poles. We also used to have a place down in Morgan County on the lake where we had Como Electric. And they ran all their fiber optic on the poles. They didn't bury it until the last pole and into your house. So we had fiber optic all the way to our house. And I'm not sure if Ameren would let a private, another company string fiber optic on their poles. Does anyone have an answer to that?
Oh, here we go.
So we work, Mayor Robinson, I work with the next on, we work with electric co-ops building fiber to the home. The reason why Ameren is, I'm sorry. Talked about that before. But anyway, the reason why is the full attachment. And a lot of it, they use that attachment to upgrade their system and people just can't afford it. So in the Como area and some areas that we have to attach to the Ameren poles, it's cheaper to go underground than to attach. The working relationship, the trying to work with Ameren to get a full attachment fee is just not.
I can address that. We're actually talking, Ameren is interested in getting in the middle of this space. And that's something we call it make readies. And that's an issue that we're going to really have to deal with. Other states have dealt with it in a big way with West Virginia, what they've done probably in enhancement council. There are folks out there who are struggling with this, and I mean struggling with it because it's rather complicated and you start to get into the utilities, you get into Travis's country. And we'll just hand him the microphone here and he can address this issue as well.
I actually did file a bill with Ameren to use a smart grid to try to allow the spaces across the state that Ameren has building out their smart grid to be reused for that capacity for broadband, which would basically essentially allow the bill didn't pass, couldn't probably get a hearing, but it would allow that smart grid to be used for service providers to lease the spectrum they have on their already built out smart grid and provide services in those really rural areas where Ameren's already providing service. It just made a lot of sense to think of it that way, but there are a lot of dynamics in that. They're investor-owned utilities, so they're not like Calabite, they're not like the socket, or they can't go out and kind of do whatever they want. They've got a lot of rules under the PSC, the Public Service Commission. They're very regulated, so they needed a bill to allow them to even offer to lease space on their spectrum to allow a service provider to come in and maybe lease some of that spectrum for areas where they may be interested in providing service. So there are a lot of dynamics other than, it's expensive. What was mentioned, it may be really expensive for Ameren to even allow you to use their poles. Beyond that, there's some other regulatory issues that need to be taken care of before you can try to reuse the infrastructure we're already building. Ameren's building out infrastructure, new smart grid, new utility infrastructure, and a lot of the energy companies are doing that. We should try to figure out ways to repurpose what we're building out to provide some of these services. We can figure that out. I think that would be helpful. It doesn't answer all the problems because Ameren doesn't cover every area of Missouri, but it's one way to look at it. I think we ought to take an all the above approach to how do we figure out these answers. So I don't know that it helps your situation exactly, but I hope at some point we can reuse the infrastructure we've already built to provide some of these answers in the future.
You ever building that out, use their smart meters?
That I can't answer that. I know that they're just building new infrastructure. They've taken they've done massive investments over the last couple of years on the grid, trying to build it out, trying to update it for 2021. It's you look at some of these poles, they're old all across rural Missouri. So there's a lot of updating that needs to happen in our infrastructure, not only just to make sure we have reliable energy, but also for cybersecurity reasons. So it's really important that those are those old lines are replaced, and we have a system that can withstand cybersecurity issues, but also it's a modern system.
So my name is Sarah Eber. I'm with the Lincoln University Cooperative Extension. My colleague, Dr. Gonzalez here behind me. And that made me think of another question that we've been talking about, Ameren. So has anyone considered working with some of like the electric co-ops in some of those small areas? I assume you're doing that too. Okay, cool. Then the other question I was going to bring, I'm hoping to hear tonight is Dr. Gonzalez and I, and a lot of our constituents at Lincoln at Extension are working with some really low income and limited resource individuals anyway. And a lot of the community-based organizations, faith-based organizations that we work with, they find themselves, like you were talking, the kids show up at the community-based organization because they have some Wi-Fi they can use. And that's what they're doing with them for after school. And so, and then for our farmers and our small farm operations folks, really trying to deal with some of the vaccine hesitancy and some of the health issues going on in those rural areas where they have no access to any of that, out in the middle of the field or even in the middle of Charleston, Missouri, where there should be internet access, but it's half the time never there. So I'm hoping to hear tonight what kind of plan you're looking at to help reach that, and hopefully we can hear some ways that they can help you get there.
Absolutely. And just give everybody a little history lesson. 2018, we put some statutes in place, especially gave us the broadband fund, gave us the broadband office, which is actually an officer who needs help, needs FTEs for us in the legislature. And we also put it into place a state standard, 25.3. So that tracks the federal standard. Anybody looking at the federal funds coming down, they're thinking out loud, they're calling it a recommendation. The recommendation is a requirement. 120 down is worst case, 100 symmetrical is best case. A few years ago, 10.1 was considered to be revolutionary. We knew 2018 the statute would become obsolete, we just didn't know how soon. It's already there. So what we're going to have to do is take a really hard look at how we future-proof what we do. Also take a hard look at the state's strategic plan as far as broadband deployment there is for it. We just basically need to implement it. But at the same time, we also have to be aware of the folks out there are actually doing the work now. So my neck of the woods, I represent Campbell, basically Marion County, Shelby County, part of Monroe County, Monroe City. Rawls County electric to our immediate south has been hardwiring broadband since 2009. Shovel ready, right? They were shovel ready. They've been deploying ever since. So you've got folks out there actually doing it. You've got some providers here in the room. I'd like to get the microphone over. Some folks are out there actually doing it. Anybody here? That's part of where we are is folks are actually out there doing this stuff and they're doing it really well. We just don't know their names yet.
I'm Clint Smith with Cal Electric Cooperative and Cal Light Technology. And I think I want to, address your issue just a little bit and probably talk about the complications that the entities in the room that are providers, it just kind of comes about. So first off, I think everyone needs to understand that, obviously if you own the business, at the end of the day, you have to be able to pay your bills. And so, to make a substantial business case work, it truly has to work for the business. And if it doesn't work, then obviously there has to be some type of funds granted to that entity to make that work. So take, for instance, the situation that you have in your community. As a co-op member and let's just say an individual that runs the business, we have 6 people per mile at Cal Electric System. And those 6 people per mile needs to have a business case scenario that makes that work. You may be in Howard County where that cooperative has 1 person per mile or maybe 2. And so the business case maybe doesn't work as well in that area. But if I go to maybe a community that has 50 people per mile, that is much better than 6, you may very well have 2 or 3 providers in that community that works for that financial model for that entity. So while someone, I understand, is starving to death for the entity itself to keep its doors open and to make that work, you may see 2 or 3 providers in that community. I look at, take for instance, Callaway County. I'm proud to say that Representative Fitzwater's community probably has 99% of that community served, but maybe it's Socket, maybe it's Kingdom Telephone, maybe it's Callaway, but the community is served. There's areas in the community though that is more dense, that there may be 2 providers in that, and that works for, you know, those entities in that business case. So just because you may see 2 entities in a community, and I know it may seem like it's a struggle that someone else doesn't get it, that's the reason why that is. As for the person at the end of the line, there's a different goal there. I take Callaway Electric. I look at Kingdom Telephone and Callaway Electric, Callaway Technology. I think we are invested in the community to take care of our community members, and that's what we're gonna do. Once we go outside of our community and our members, and take, for instance, if I'm gonna go to Boone County or Cole County, then that business case has to make sense for the membership of Callaway Electric. And so in order to do that, we are probably gonna look at a dense area and make that business plan work. You can, I mean, it's an ugly word, people call it cherry picking or whatever they want to say it, but at the end of the day, we have to take care of the members of Callaway Electric, because that's who puts the bill in that, once we leave our service territory. So that gets real difficult for the goal of the entity at the end of the day, what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. It's our goal to take care of Callaway Electric. It's like it's the goal of Ameren to take care of their shareholders. It may be the goal of Socket to take care of whomever they're speaking with, and Kingdom Telephone to take care of their membership as well. So once you get into the dynamic of why the last person's left behind, that's exactly how it kind of comes to evolve. So I know we can talk a lot about probably that, and I'm gonna quit talking and let someone else do, but you know, when we talk about the complications of it, it's, if everyone just takes care of their people, it's pretty simple, but if not, then obviously Cole's gonna be left behind.
Making a little, I'll just do a little clarification here. The state standards basically tell us that unserved is 10-1 or nothing. We have people out there who have nothing. Underserved is 10-1 to 25-3. Other is 25-3 and over, which hopefully will be all of us here real soon, but it's not quite there yet. So when we talk about served, unserved, we're having 2 different conversations. There's a speed served, unserved, and then there's, if you don't have it, that's an access question. So what we're trying to deal with here are the questions of access, speed, and affordability. And they're all 3 buckets. Somewhere in age like 23, dealing with the congressional office, at 21 counties, every county creates its own weather. Everybody's different. So we do these town halls all across the state. We're looking at different issues, but they're very similar. And the most similar one to them all is, hey, I don't have it at all. There are folks out there in Florissant who don't have it at all. It's not a question of whether or not it's available, it's a question of whether or not they can afford it. So as we go around the state, we find out lots of really interesting stuff and lots of interesting providers. We talked to folks who were looking at the real last mile access at Town Hall in Ava. Anybody been down that neck of the woods lately? It's all ravines, it's up, it's down, it's a lot of water, it's beautiful, but it's not really feasible to run out there and say, we're gonna bury, you know, fiber anytime soon. It's not even feasible to run it aerial, pole to pole, not least in those numbers. So these are some issues that are present all across the state. We have deserts everywhere. One of the 10 worst served counties in the state is in my district. It's also the 3rd oldest county district. And the one thing they need above all others is telehealth. And one thing we found out from telemedicine in the COVID epidemic was, oh, by the way, 1,500% increase in some of those providers using it from home. And people in my district call that says, I can't. I don't have enough bandwidth to do a Zoom call. So people living house down, who shouldn't be out in the middle of this, are out there. The other side of that coin is mental health. All right, it's telling me that Martin Behavioral Health in Hannibal is on Broadway. Nobody went through the front door of that place. That parked in the alley, went in the back door. There's still a stigma attached to that. It shouldn't be, but it is. So we've got some really good innovations going out there. The Secretary of State Ashcroft is working on the program. to put broadband into public libraries in ways we haven't done before. One bucket is workforce development, so if you need to take a proctoring exam, because 99% of your applications are online, we got people out there who don't know how to do an email address, people who don't know how to boot the thing up to begin with. That's called digital literacy. So we take care of that. You need a proctoring exam for industry certification, you can take it. That's one. The other is, more interestingly, is HIPAA compliant areas within the public libraries, over 340 in the state. Every county has at least one. Say, here's your ability to talk to a doctor, medical provider, regular health, no health, doesn't matter. It's HIPAA compliant. What's the stigma associated with going into a public library? Oh, that person wants to be smarter. There is no stigma. So we're actually seeing some stuff out there that's very encouraging, but at the same time, we go places, we go all around the state, and hear the same stories, basically different faces, but the same story. I don't have it. I'm not where I need to be. As a business, I don't have enough bandwidth here to take a PayPal payment. So I'm still going to trade shows on the weekend. I don't want to. I want to stay home with my kids. I mean, this stuff is everywhere we go across the state. There's still several thousand households out there that don't have it, or if they do have it, it's not enough. And many people here are involved in precision agriculture. Watching all this equipment go down the road on 61, Highway 61, I get to see all the John Deere stuff coming down from the Quad Cities. And it takes 2 trucks now to get these farm equipment pieces out, combines especially. $500,000, $600,000 piece of equipment. What do they all run on? GPS, all of them. How good is that equipment? It's only as good as your ability to get that signal. And the downloads they're generating in terms of data is such now that equipment dealers are hiring people to sit there and interpret it. So folks will say, hey, here's what you're doing wrong with your input, here's what you can do to improve your harvest, and on it goes. That's creating its own industry. But it's only as good as the signal is if you can grab onto it and operate the equipment using GPS. So you had a question over here. Let's hear from you.
How am I making it better? Well, I'm in Callaway County, I'm in Travis's area, and we are Interim Telephone. We're also Phoenix Fiber, we're building outside, and I agree 100% with everything Clint said. And that's hard to say because Clint and I are competitors in our territory, but I do agree with Clint on those things. I wanted to address a couple of things. Building in the rural, as Clint said, is very, very expensive. If you're in, we bury everything, and we bury fiber. So fiber is that transport mechanism that will take us into the future, where we just change out the electronics on each end, and we can change with technology. We can offer, we're all offering gigabit services, which you may not know what that is, but it's 1,000 megabytes. And if you compare that back in the day of dial-up, you might have got 54K. Well, 54K is 54 kilobytes, and a meg is 1,000 kilobytes. So it's quite, you know, my point is fiber is your future to make sure that we're future-proof, okay? The other thing is when we're addressing building out in the rural, we're a rural telephone company. We also have 6 members per square mile, so it's quite, you know, remote. When it costs you possibly $25,000 a mile to build that fiber just to get down the street, or if you hit rock, it could be $35,000, $45,000 a mile, and that's just to get the main line down the road. Then it costs you another $1,500 to connect to the home from the road itself. It's quite expensive. So in answering those questions, that's why we have to have support. That's why we have to have grants and the things that our state is doing, that COVID has proven that we need broadband. The other thing that we need help with in the rural area is we need to educate people, because in our territory, in our rural territory, I may have 3,000 members, but I probably pass 6,000 locations. And when you're spending that kind of money to build in the rural area, we need help educating these people that why they need broadband. I mean, everybody, I think, everybody needs broadband. Even some of the older grandparents that maybe 20 years ago didn't care about internet. but, you know, a 70-year-old today is probably using the internet. So we need help in educating. So when we do spend the money out in the rural area, that we get enough support and revenues from that to help pay for that network. The other thing is there's a lot of low income in the rural areas, as we all know, and there's challenges in that. A broadband provider, to meet that business case that Clint was talking about, is going to have to produce a certain amount of revenue to pay for that. If we get the subsidies to help build it, that definitely helps us. But it also costs quite a bit to maintain that network going forward. So if you're able to provide, and Missouri does provide universal service lifeline program to end users to help support those things. But that's another avenue that some of these state dollars could do once we get broadband built out, is to help those lower income people help pay for it. And I know you may or may not know about the EBD emergency thing that the federal side did. It's $50 a month. If they make it at permanent, that's good. But $50 a month may sound like an awful lot, but $50 a month doesn't pay for $25,000 to $45,000 a mile broadband when you've got 6 members per, 6 people per square mile. So we're here to do it. We've been doing it since internet in its dawning. Our company has been doing it, and the electrics are doing it, and that's fantastic. The small telcos are doing it. It's sad that CenturyLink doesn't have copper enough to do a telephone. They should be a carrier of last resort, so they should be obligated to provide that emergency telephone number. But anyway, I will shut up and pass it along. But we are doing it. We need the help. We need the funds. We need the education and all of that. So thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the federal piece. Emergency broadband funds are administered by the FCC. The FCC has the cap 2, cap whatever options. RDOT is through the USDA. NTIA is the Department of Commerce. We've got all these federal folks out there throwing money around like it's going out of style. I look at this as something that George Patton called the unforgiving minute. Once it's gone, it's gone. And we've got more money flying around out there than we know what to do with. We know what to do with it in this room. We need to put it in broadband. I just wanted to get a sense from folks out there, if you guys have any idea how much at the county level folks are going to get. I've got a commissioner here. What you're hearing, it's something that I've dealt with now going around the state. I talked to one county commissioner who gave back 70% of the CARES Act money. Why? Oh, we're afraid of the feds. And I get this little chalk pick everywhere I go. The feds are saying it's a priority. Priority means all things being equal, it's up here. Don't be afraid. Just go ahead and do it. And Shelby County did it in my district. Ross County did it to my immediate south. There's still 3 people. I've asked. I've inquired after them. The FBI did not seize their assets. It did not come in and shut down their offices. It does not arrest anybody. It does not imprison anybody. It's okay. So what I'm hearing from folks is, well, we're just afraid. We're waiting for final guidance. I get that. But some of the folks have their checks already. Is there a plan? Anybody hearing anything on those slides, or would you care to address that?
I'll attend Harry Auto Western District, Cole County. Before I get there, is there sort of a sweet spot that televides or telephone says, even after the thing is in and you have a user there, that user should expect to pay somewhere between X and Y. Is there an amount that people ought to, they can't get this free forever. They might get a heck of a subsidy to get it installed. But once they're up and running, they're gonna have a monthly bill. Is there sort of an industry standard of what it ought to be when it meets the requirement that the feds are throwing at us?
It really, not really. And quite honestly, competition will drive the pricing. But in today's world, $50 is not enough for the rural. Right. I mean, as Clint said, the business case has to make sense. We have to stay in business. It's expensive to maintain going forward, but $50 is getting closer, but if I had to put a number on it today in our rural area, I'd say a minimum of 65. And the price of things is going up every day, every year. But competition will drive it.
Period, from our perspective, charter.
We're broadcasting, so
yeah.
you pick that up.
No, from our perspective with charter, one of the things that, because we're doing a very large build out over the next 6 years in the state with the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, which Representative Gray mentioned. So, we're investing over $200 million in private capital, that's are keeping it at 50. And we've been out talking to counties about this. And that's one of the questions we kind of get is what the deal is. Because a lot of these counties and areas have been sort of, there's been a lot of money that's previously flowed into certain areas in the state where there's one game in town to where, a wireless provider is the only thing there. They're providing, 3 meg down and that's it. And it's $120 for that, at least I'm proud of our company that what we do is a national pricing model. So that the same prices that people are paying in, Kansas City or St. Louis or New York City, that same pricing model where there's a lot of competition is used in those same areas. So those people are not going to get gouged, for instance. But she's right. I mean, it's just, it is, when we start talking about getting these really rural areas, just the cost of the build is immense. But then after that, the maintenance of it too becomes a really big deal. So, those prices are always going to be higher than probably what people want to pay, but it is something that is been taken advantage of in the past.
If I ever need Elon Musk, I'm going to take it over in this direction just a moment. We had a series of Ameren questions earlier, and we have somebody who can answer us. So I want to talk about Ameren's role moving forward and maybe raise some of the problems we're dealing with.
Everybody, Zach Monroe, Ameren, Missouri. Something that we have been pushing for the last 2 years, we're going to need some legislation to make it available in large quantity, is we have been putting up fiber optics on our transmission system. And we do that for our own purposes, due to the smart equipment we're putting on those substations that requires a certain level of fiber and the equipment to back it up. It's, to get into technical terms, it's something called OPGW, which is optical ground wire, and we string it on the top of the pole in the neutral line. And it is hollow. The outside is the lightning resistor that takes it to the ground. The inside is hollow. We run the fiber optic through the hollow center. We only need a percentage of those fiber streams. They come in a standard bundle. So we're able to lease out those extra bundles in what we call backhaul or middle mile. It's essentially things that connect the different areas of this state back into St. Louis or Kansas City into the main area that connects the World Wide Web. And so we need some legislation to do that. And Travis has sponsored that bill the past 2 years. And we're going to need some clarification of the statute, how we work with the PSC, and we're going to need some clarification of statute to address how we work with easements, similar to what the co-ops did in 2018. And so if we can do that, we can open up 1,300 miles of fiber optic, which could be accessed at over 100 substations throughout northern Missouri, Midwest, mid-central Missouri, southeastern Missouri, south central Missouri. And so that would help alleviate problems for two areas. One, where there's not any more floats for a node to connect to the fiber. Two, we're hooking that up and then build out to communities, or in areas where there may be fiber and it's overly congested, so it doesn't allow providers to offer a level of service. Now there's a new point of presence that would not be congested because it's brand new basically. That would allow folks to plug into that and provide service elsewhere. And that's available for anybody. That's not only to certain folks. co-ops can use it, small telephones can use it, large telecoms can use it, cell towers can use it, anybody can use it, fixed wireless folks can use it. So that's an option that we bring to the table that would, and the cool thing about that, tell people, is it really doesn't do anything to help us, it helps out any Ameren customer. Because any revenues that we would take in from this would flow back to offset customer rates and lower the bills. That's how that's set up. And so, Booster, there's a question on pole attachment to make ready. You know what the specific question was?
Why are your pole attachments being so high?
Why are the pole attachment being so high? We have a standard FCC process that's what we follow. To be fair, I'm not familiar with what the fee is on that, but the standard schedule and engineering costs are standard statewide for a whole system. And we do that to comply with FCC, so we don't, big favorites on who goes on the pole. If the pole is considered ready by an engineer, people can attach to it. If it's considered, needs more make-ready standards, pole replacement, whatever that is, there's a standard timeline that we follow to handle the pole replacement.
The process. I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer. Why in the world is that not happening?
The first part I was speaking about.
Yes.
So when we first introduced the bill, that was a concession with COVID, and a lot of things that didn't make it very far that year just kind of fell off the table. Last year, the concern from a lot of people was, one, they were worried that we were going to be an internet service provider. We don't want to be in that business. We tried to write the language that we felt dealt with that issue. There are folks, that disagree with that. I think another concern is that whereas we are not competing as an ISP, if we give access to a substation that we would lease out to any willing provider that wanted to use it, and someone's already there, that's competition to that person that's already there. So I think those two reasons are why it didn't go anywhere.
So why would Ameren not want to be in the internet business?
So we are an electric provider, and you have to go through a whole realm of FCC licensing and get into an area of business that we are not set up to get into. We don't have expertise to run an internet company. We don't want to get into licensing. It's a whole different set of regulations than what we operate under right now. We don't want to do it. No one, but we want to make available the assets we do have for people to get to then look into us and help in areas where it doesn't exist right now.
We do have these new lines, auto lines installed. You actually market those to any local internet providers?
So there have been many people that have approached us wanting to lease it. The reason we need the legislation is, first, the co-op issue I was telling you about. The second reason is because those are considered electric plant assets of ours. Current law says if I want to let anyone else use those, I have to go to the Public Service Commission and have a rate case. Average time of a rate case is 11 months. So in theory, how it would work is someone says, yes, I want to lease access to that piece of fiber. We say, okay, we work out the terms, we take that to the commission. The commission takes however long it needs to go through the process of a rate case and says, yep, that's good to go, or no, and we think you should do it like that. It's really hard to do business with someone who's trying to find options on where they're going to deploy this money when it's coming hot and fast, that I've got to wait X amount of months, most likely 11, to figure out if I'm going to get an email to hook in and into that. So what the legislation that Travis filed sets up a process that makes that way more quicker. And so if we could do that, then we don't have to take every single potential lease agreement we work out to the commission. We would do them as they come, and then every rate case we have, the commission would look at them and say, did you do a good deal for your customers, or did you give it away for free? Because the whole point of this is, from their perspective, is, are you making good use of that asset? Did you lease it back at a good rate so that helps your customer lower their bill? You did well for them. That would happen at the rate case instead of on every single deal. They put all the deals together, look at them all, thumbs up, thumbs down, Like that, if they think we did that, they take it out on us in the rate case. And address it like that.
As I walk this over to Representative Fitzwater to explain the headwinds and what is bill trying to do, show of hands from all the providers in the room, how many of you want more regulation in your life? It's unanimous across the entire state. Everyone, I asked that question, no takers. Why is that?
It's hard to deal with the day-to-day activities if all we're doing is filling out reports and dealing with regulation. So as a telephone company, I have lived and breathed regulation for my entire career in this industry. I will say that it is less with broadband, but broadband, as he said, is not an easy journey. It takes a lot of time, experience, talent, just to deal with it. So somebody just saying, hey, I want to be a broadband provider, I say, you better go have your head examined. But that's just my personal opinion. But we deal with a lot of regulation today. We have to fill out, even with broadband, we have to fill out reports called the 477 every 6 months. And unfortunately, the reason the broadband mapping system is so terrible is every provider that fills out those reports, the data is not, there's no way to substantiate it to make sure it's accurate. So garbage in, garbage out. There's all sorts of talk about trying to get an accurate broadband map so we know where the providers are and what services they're providing. But in our world, regulation, and I'm not saying regulation is a bad thing, but if you're a provider that is trying to do everything right with integrity, regulation just ties our hands. So no, I don't want any more regulation.
I'm going to give it to Representative Fitzwater. He's going to finish that up.
I could make an observation from Amsterdam, right? But it goes back, Tim, Brandon and I go together for I'm the Eastern District Commissioner of Cooper County, and we have recently had some conversation with Como, because when the ARPA money was put out there, I think most of these people are going to come to the county commissions and talk to them rightfully so about what's available. We were sharing the fact coming up here with Governor Walsh now putting a $400 million price tag out there. And one of the concerns I think I have, and I'm not speaking for other commissioners, is that we have had our money no different from many of the other counties. We're being very hesitant. By the way, we zero balanced our CARES Act money, so that was all done. A lot of that with our school districts. I'm very proud of that fact. As it helped keep the kids face to face as they needed to be, or they had to go virtual. They got one-on-one with computers, et cetera. So we're very proud of that. But it also created an issue as well too, because I asked our superintendent of schools, where our weaknesses were. She outlined 5 or 6 areas in the county that had need for the high-speed internet. And most people dealing with school districts, I admire what you guys are doing, as I admire all of them throughout the state and country, is that virtual is not the way to learn. You want the kids face to face, but when you got to go to virtual, you got to have the resources available for the kids. Not all parents are good teachers. Not all of them want to be teachers as well. But with that being said, so there is that issue. But with 400 million, and I don't know how many, I know what money we got, and we're willing to spend money. I speak for the other two commissioners, but they said the same thing. With some of these providers, so long as we understand how that's being done, we don't want to see it fragmented. And the biggest concern I have individually is you take 400 million, you may have another 400 million out here with various counties or more. I forget what exactly the state received for the counties first, or not state, it was funneled through the federal government. But with that being said, there needs to be, as Jim said, oversight of that. So when we wake up 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we find out some of this money's not been spent. And I'm not trying to be a two-story frivolously in that fashion, because we fragmented here, we fragmented over there, we didn't bring it all together from that standpoint. So I think that is just a critical issue at this point in time. And again, speaking to the schools, this virtual is going to be around for a while. COVID is going to be around for a while. Schools start out with all good intentions to remain in school face to face, but then things turn south. And then they go to virtual, and they got to do it like that.
as well. So we need to provide, I'm on the board, the school board, and I've always believed that it's all about the kids. That's one thing we need to keep. I know there's got to be business plans. I used to work private sector. We had to make money when we produced product. I understand that. But kids need to learn. That's our legacy as well too.
If I could add one thing too, your question about regulation. And I'm not real familiar with all the regulations in the state of Missouri, especially when you're talking about utilities and electric. But what I can tell you in my community in Cooper County, the only people that don't have access to high-speed internet are Ameren customers. And it seems like Ameren's, more regulated than our co-ops and some of these other utilities. So I'm not sure that you can say regulation is going to help. It seems like maybe there would be some things with deregulation that might help alleviate some of these problems. And as an Ameren customer, it's really difficult for me not to be mad as hell for Ameren because I don't have high-speed internet. But I understand too that, just about everything Ameren does is by statute or by law, and their hands are tied on some of these issues. So, throwing money at things is great, and I think that is a big piece of the puzzle. But hopefully you guys can look and maybe find some things that maybe regulation or deregulation could help with also.
Yeah, and Louis wanted me to follow up a little bit on the bill that I filed with Ameren to try to alleviate that. You're exactly right. They're an investor-owned utility that is under the Public Service Commission. So they're constantly being watched. Everything they're doing is being evaluated on a constant basis and on a yearly and multi-year deal. So there's a lot there. And so anything with them is just really, it's a much more difficult battle to get legislation done because everybody is very interested in protecting the consumers, which is good in the legislature. You want a legislature that wants to protect consumers. You have a large investor-owned utility that wants to provide the service. So there's a balance, and it's hard to get legislation done. But you're right, it's extremely hard to get that done for a regulated utility like Ameren. Whereas a co-op, or Calibite, they can go where my district, thankfully, they can go where it's needed, and King Telephone and other providers, they have a lot more flexibility, even though they still have to deal with federal regulation, which the state doesn't have any authority over impacting either. So there are a lot of dynamics, but I think what we need to focus on is all of the above. How can we provide as many feasible opportunities as we can to expand broadband? And so the Ameren piece makes a lot of sense because they cover such a big swath of the state, and if you can make it a little bit easier for a service provider to already have that built out to just kind of ride that infrastructure build out, that's good for the rural areas, but it's also good for the city areas. I'm glad to see Lincoln here and talking about how even in urban areas, especially low income areas, you can go into some parts of the city where there is no available service that covers the needs of a different socioeconomic class. And I think it's important that we think of those areas of the state as well to ensure that there's service across the board.
And just speaking back a little bit on about the education. So not so fun fact, 23% of all our K-12 students as of this moment, according to DESI, our folks who keep track of this stuff, do not have 25 free access. Fun fact, Shelby County used CARES Act money to basically hardwire the North Shelby campus. Called one evening, presiding commissioner was still a free man, used the CARES Act money, part of it went there, part of it went into the city of Shelby develop for some infrastructure improvements. And the conversation I had with them about that was in two parts. As long as you've got online education and you got a telehealth component, you're going to be fine. That's not going to come looking for you. You can justify everything you did within the COVID umbrella. And that's something we need to be looking down the road. It's not just COVID, it's weather-based. We put that in statute where folks basically can conduct their schools, flip the switch, you go virtual. That's something we've already authorized that. Just the same thing as we authorize folks to be end users in their home, the telemedicine service in 2016. These things are already on the books. We just need to figure out how to work them and make them go properly. Want to take a little time, we've got anybody on Zoom? I can't see their hands up, unmute.
So Amy says, regarding the pricing comments earlier, as regards to the price that people should expect to pay, in comments, if you're looking at universal service, but it's to serve those very sparse areas we were discussing earlier, this is where federal and state funds come. It makes the state and local governments need to look at not only how much the technology costs to install, but also what are the fixed wireless providers let them talk about how much cheaper it is to install their fiber. My question to them is that why do you charge more? Work with hundreds of electric co-ops across the country, and virtually all of them offer a $50 package that is 100 megabits per second. I don't think a large investment provider can see some half these funds, and they are charging $105 for 100 megabits per second for wireless service. That's what he says the state should also not try to do a technology like all other infrastructure government lines, whether material or media will be used. You would not allow water companies or lead pipes in or bridge across the River to be built on.
Okay, anybody care to address? Yeah.
No, I totally agree with Andy. Of course, I work with them, but another thing that I want to say about this is about regulation. So I am asking the representatives in this room, Mr. Bernstein, there's a lot of SEC funding that came down. I live in Osage County. There I do have a wireless internet provider that, according to the SEC webpage, they are supposed to be providing 300 meg. I can only get 10. He says that he has one customer. According to the regulation for the FCC, he only has to prove that he has one customer getting 300 meg, and that is in Lynn, Missouri, at a business. Everybody else in there. So there's another wireless agency that got SEC RDOF funding in our area. They received the funding in late 2019, early 2020. According to the FCC, they have 3 years to serve the area, the census blocks that they won the money to serve. 40% of those said census meters within that census block. I contacted that entity since I live in that area. And I said, okay, so it's 2021, where are you at? They came out there, they said, well, if you're within an 8-mile radius of this tower, you should be able to get 100 meg. So I called them out there. I do the design, I do mapping. I know the radius, I'm within this area. The technician and his supervisor comes out and they said, well, you can't get service. I live on top of a hill. You're not allowed, you can't get service out of this entity. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do about this? I said, you got the funds. And he said, well, we're only going to put this up if we get signups. That is not how they received that money from FCC. They received those federal money to go and serve those census blocks. And there is no accountability at all for it. They are reporting that they are giving us 300 meg within these census blocks and only serving 1 meter. They are reporting that, yes, we're going to receive millions of dollars to serve 40% of these census blocks. And then the person that came to my house said, we only did that to step on the competition so that they wouldn't get the funding. So I am asking that if the state government is going to give funds, that's why I totally agree with Andy, you have to have a plan to make sure that you don't have, if you're building a road, that you have gravel one area, concrete one area, pavement on the other. It has to be sustainable. And you have to hold the people that are getting our hard-earned tax money accountable for it. Because there is way too much money that has been spent out there for AT&T, for CenturyLink, for a bunch of entities that has not been to help the community.
And if I can just pick up on that just a little bit, you identified 3 issues. Number one, we talked about it previously, the maps are garbage. We all know the maps are garbage. The feds really haven't fixing that question. Missouri is part of a pilot project that's supposed to help. Results I haven't seen quite yet, but I know I'm dealing with the demonstration, a little pilot error watching them in real time with their crayons, identifying an outbuilding rectangular that they said, oh, they don't need internet. They did the house, they did the garage, and well, and the person sitting next to me in the demonstration said, that's my hog barn. The person sitting next to me was Chris Chin, director of the Missouri Department of Agriculture, who immediately went up and scraped out whoever was, doing the crayons in upstate New York or where they were located. So even when the feds do something right, they don't get it right. So it's something we're going to have to address as a state issue, and we know that. We also know that the zoo has actually worked on this extensively, something called the resource rail. If you haven't seen it yet, I invite you to go take a look at it. It's real-time mapping. It's not part of the state package yet, but rather would we like it to be. West Virginia's done something similar. They call it Broadband Enhancement Council. It has legislative oversight, it has stakeholder engagement, it's real-time, and it also has an active piece. So that's something I would really like to see come back. I filed that bill, didn't get a hearing. Yes, I have feelings about that. I think we'll probably get a hearing on that this year. So basically, it's an intermediate step. We also have something in statute, put that in HB 1768 last year, it's my bill, to say if you don't get your job done within 3 years with our statement, get the money back. You got 3 years. Folks out there know how to deploy this stuff. It's not going to take them 3 years to do it. They have a plan, they know how to work the plan, they don't get the money without it. So there are some things there that we've already worked on. Another thing you mentioned was census block. That's garbage. We all know it's garbage. We all know that the advertised rates up to, that's lawyer speak, or not happy. It's like your title, it says, 2.4 acres more or less, it's always less. It's just one of those things. So Missouri was ranked as low as 49th in speed out of the entire country in the last 2 years. That's a problem. We know it's a problem. Question is, what do we do about it with the state funds? Well, you're going to need to tell me have some real statistics as opposed to the pie in the sky stuff. And at the federal level, unfortunately, we can't do a thing about census block. Only the feds can do census block. We can look at our own state standards and take a look and say, not feeling it. The feds are actually moving away from census block into something more, what we call a community scanner, which makes more sense. Census block, you check the box, really one person served, you're all served. That's what happened in Shelby County every single time. So you've got a couple of fiber rings in some of the more populated areas, 6,000 people in Shelby County. Their maximum population was 1,900. They've lost population basically ever since. The young people go away, they don't come back home. The old people stay and they die. That's no way to run a railroad. That's no way to run a state. It's no way to treat people who want to stay put and be the farm. They want to stay put where they grew up. They want to stay put basically out in God's country where they belong. We want to make sure that it happens. So, the answer to that question is in several parts. There are some resources out there available. Taking a look at them, plan to do more with them, but you're 100% correct. A lot of what the feds do is they don't. And one thing we pattern ourselves on with our state broadband office is what they do in the state of Minnesota. They have 4 or 5 full-time employees who do nothing but go around the state, making sure that that money that they put in is doing what it's supposed to do on time, on task. And I don't mean maybe. And that's a problem for folks who aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Feds don't enforce that, we can. So it's something I look forward to. And y'all understand when we're done with this, we'll issue a report. Part of that report will be what we get from you. This is something we're going to archive this, go back to this, right? Legislative history, we'll know what was said here. But also, we need reports from folks, we need case studies, we need whatever you've got that's out there. I've asked the regional planning commissions to give us their plans. They were part of this 10 years ago, the first time we rolled out broadband. What have you done since? And I'm starting to get those in already. So we'll put that in the report so everybody can take a look at it. Here's where we're at. Here's where we need to be. But we're only as good as what we hear from you. That's why we're doing these meetings, so we can hear this directly from you, because you're the ones dealing with it every day. So I hear you, and I feel your pain, and know exactly what you're talking about. We can't do much to the feds except yell at them and scream. And frankly, that's what happened after the CARES Act, and they said, you got to get all this done by December 30th, 2020. It was physically impossible to do what they said needed to be done. So the ARPA basically, they lit the fuse, get the ducks in a row by 2024, get everything done by 2026 or else, which is a vast improvement over what they have with CARES. But part of that was they listened. Why were they listening? Because we were yelling at them a lot, and they actually heard us. So you're not going to say or hear me say nice things about the federal government very often, but that's when they actually got right. Problem is, you can't stack the ARPA funds with anything else. That one you got wrong. So that's the limitation we have to deal with as a state. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, representatives, I should say. I think from a provider perspective, my goal on this charge spectrum. You know, from a provider's perspective, I've really appreciated working with you all and particularly DE and broadband office to be able to work through the development of the broadband grant program, because a number of those issues that we have discussed tonight, whether it be, you know, served census blocks, for instance, you know, those issues that come up with the federal programs don't really impact the state program, because the way that we operate that through the challenge process that becomes extremely important is to be able to, we can submit a project that may be in a quote unquote served census block. And we have to prove that those areas are unserved, so that we as providers are focusing our resources and private dollars, as you said, $7 for every $1 state best, to those areas that absolutely need it. So that we're not doing what Representative Reich had indicated, where we're just overbuilding and overbuilding. That becomes an extremely important thing for us as providers to make sure the state remains laser focused on getting service to those unserved areas. It's a big priority for us. It's a big thing that we've been focusing on through our rural digital opportunity bids in the state. Again, 60,000 passings around the state of Missouri over the next 6 years. As I've been doing this and going out and talking to the local communities, and particularly the county commissions, you know, one of the things that I think you've even heard tonight is this is a very technical issue that you know, county commissioners aren't always equipped to be able to figure out where do I even start, because I've heard a number of commissioners say, I'd love to do something broadband, but I don't even know where to start, right? And I'm more than happy to provide information about, from my perspective. I don't know that from a policy perspective, I'm the right person to share that information with them on where they should start. We want to be a part of that conversation, because we're going to be in the ground in a lot of these communities around the state. You know, we want to be a part of the conversation and be able to work with a local community to be able to build out to areas that are still unserved, that weren't included in RDOF, or have been a part of CAF that ultimately never got funded or isn't getting the speeds. I think all the providers, us, the co-ops, would love to be a part of whatever those locals are doing. As we start talking about things, ways to set up something, obviously the University of Missouri has done a lot of good things. Some of the regional planning commissions are doing a lot of good things. But we've also got this, again, going back to the state broadband grant program and Tim Arbeiter, you've got some resources there and some expertise there, but it's only him. And if we start talking about, you know, it would be great if I'm the presiding commissioner in Reynolds County, and I want to do something in broadband. You know, I can go hire a consultant, but it would be sure it'd be nice to be able to just pick up the phone and call the broadband office and say, I want to do something here. Can you tell me the areas that are unserved so I can go out and talk to providers about coming? I mean, getting more resources there and establishing some sort of a process to make sure the state is not only funding projects with their resources, with that 400 million, it can go a long way. But if you are able to figure out a way to piggyback off, or the locals are able to piggyback off what the state is doing as well, to go out even further into unserved areas, you start getting really close to 100% service. Because when you start talking about $1 for $7 for every $1 you invest, that money starts going a long way when you start bringing in providers like us and co-ops and some of the others, that sockets that are interested and focused on building out rural areas. I just think that could be a really big issue. We did talk about one more thing. I did want to talk about, just sort of separate from that, is, you know, when we start talking about problems that, you know, different sets of providers have with whatever the regulation is, or whatever the existing laws that regulate them are, we got to make sure that we're giving that same treatment. If it's a problem for one, it's a problem for all. So, you know, obviously the co-ops had some friendly easement language that was passed a couple years ago. Obviously, that's the appropriate thing to do. Amber mentioned something as well, that they'd like to do something on easements. Broadband is broadband. If we're going to do something on easements, everyone should enjoy those protections. If it's a barrier for one, it's a barrier for all. So that was one of our positions last year, that we were asking for, was that same sort of protection to make sure that those issues are addressed, kind of in that make-ready space. One more thing, I'll sit down. When we start getting into these make-ready issues, providers frequently will come to a pole. We have a great relationship with Ameren right now with our rates. They do have a regulated process. That's no big deal. Municipalities, same way. And co-ops are great to deal with a lot of times. But one of the issues that we come to isn't necessarily in that. It's in those relationships. It's just in the pure cost. Missouri is blessed or cursed with a very diverse terrain, however you want to look at it. From the broadband space, it's a curse. When you start getting south of the river, south of the Missouri River, you have to go aerial. So these poles that we frequently come to, that is the number one. It's going to take you to a very cheap way to be able to get things expedited, to get stuff built quickly, whether it's through RDOT or the Broadband Development Program. When you start having to go through this whole negotiation over who's going to pay for the new pole and get into all of those situations, it can lead to just delays in construction. You're talking about and on top of it, the cost. It can be upwards of $10,000 to replace a pole. You start getting into areas that are old, whether it be a co-op pole or even some of Ameren's poles are very old. And we start coming to those, and you get calls from lawmakers or residents saying, I want service. You go out and do a estimate, and it's $500,000 customer contribution for it to even come close to making sense to build, because you have to replace a pole every 7 or 8 yards. I mean, that is one of the things from an expense and a process standpoint that can just lead to huge delays and expenses. So anything the state can do on that would be, I think, at least from my perspective, would be huge to speed the deployment process.
In Cole County, a few things are done a little different. We realize that we have a total different graph than what Boone County has. And Cole County is unique. We have a lot of hills, we have a lot of little towns floating around. There's a lot of carriage money sitting in little towns. There's carriage money sitting in our county commissioner. There's carriage money sitting in Jeff City. What our chamber did was set up another economic development corporation. And a lot of business put in money because they understand the need for broadband and what they're going to get workers, and they have workers who want to work at home. And so they put their personal money into this corporation. And then they hired some individual with some expertise. His goal is not to design a system. His goal is to put out RFPs for places like Charter. These people who come in and look at giving the whole county broadband. And we're getting RFPs, and because our county is different than the next county, and these expertise guys are going to pick up Charter, because I met from Kansas City, because they know where the money's at. They know what it's going to cost. And we're hoping that we can get some pretty good ideas, and then we know what we need as far as money. We can go to the cities and see if they want to put part of their carriage money in. If the county commission has money, Jeff City has money, and then what programs are out there. These companies, they have a lot more expertise than any I do, or our county, well, not our county commission, they're in intelligence, but our city is. So the deal was we did decide to do something, trying to get something, maybe it's just, we can't wait on Jeff City, the capital, or anybody else to address Cole County. And we think that our best opportunity to getting broadband for everything is look at all the different providers and do RFPs and get their offers. Because they know where the money is all at, and they know how to get the government money. And we realize that every county is different. So our county has unique situations, and we want to maximize on those. So there again, our county, the chamber, and through economic development, we are trying to do something proactive other than wait on us at the capital to do something. Now, we may have to wait. $400 million throws a new wrench in. Those providers who are doing this every day, putting these systems in, know how to dot the i's and cross the t's quicker than we do. And we certainly don't have the money to hire a full-time expert. It's kind of like capital, we kind of rely upon lobbyists. These private providers, sometimes I customers, if I don't have one, all I have is radio wire, and I'm paying more than they're talking about. You know, I've always wondered why we couldn't have radio wire everywhere, but that's not the point. The point is, locally, each county can start looking at how they can do their county and use the expertise of some of the providers to come up with a pretty good program, good idea.
Representative, let me, I just wanted to mention one other thing. Mike brought it up, Zach and Amber brought it up. One of the additional problems in the rural area, the co-ops have had this problem as well. When you're in a highly populated area, you can use the public right of way for utilities. That's a given. But when you get out into the rural area, even where the co-ops have our poles and our lines, a lot of those are on private property. They're on private easements. And when they gave us, for example, the co-op, the right to put our poles and provide them electricity, those easements didn't say anything about communications. So we don't have the right to do that unless we deal with this easement issue. And I wanted to commend Representative Fitzwater, because that bill that they were talking about addresses that issue, the easement issue. And the Missouri Farm Bureau, landowner rights folks, worked with the group to try to come up with a way around this problem that was equitable for everybody. But that's one issue, and he's talking about it too. I can't let him on my pole if he doesn't have an easement from the landowner. So these things are a little touchier in rural areas. It's not just the money, it's not just, you know, the density, but that legislation has probably, that's gone quite a ways toward resolving that issue, if we can get that brought back up again. I know it didn't get as far as you wanted it to, but building that coalition of everybody involved is key, and you made some good progress on that.
I'm Justin Aldridge, Boone County Southern District Commissioner, and I just want to echo some of the statements that were made here earlier. I can tell you, I can speak to some of the providers where broadband service is in Boone County. I can tell you where it's not, because I've had at least 75 homeowners, residents here in Southern Boone reach out to the county commission and reach out to me. And that's not counting, you know, our popular areas like Columbia. That's right here in Ashland, where people are underserved or not served at all.
All right, going in a little different direction, and questions been asked, basically, what are some resources? University Extension, like Marshall Stewart, what they've been doing the last year and a half, 2 years. Bolivar County is one of our worst served counties in the state. It's beautiful, but it's a nightmare for folks who deploy broadband. They've gone in there, basically sat down, convened stakeholders, got together, basically everybody rowing in the same direction at the same time. How are we going to get this done? So I mentioned our particular region sat down, put together a broadband steering committee, basically done the same thing. So there are folks out there who do that. University Extensions, every county in the state. Marshall Stewart will go to any county in the state and help you with this kind of thing. So folks are like, oh, you know where it's on to. Turn to your nearest county extension office. And if they don't know the answer to it, they'll figure it out in 15 minutes because they know somebody who does. Second, I look at it as the RBC basically, or University Extension with money. These are folks who are trained to go out there and find those grants, hunt down wherever the money is, and figure out what to do with it. They're trained to write grants, they're trained to deal with rules, regulations, all that other red tape that snarls the rest of us up. It's what they do for a living. They're the best at it. So folks aren't engaged in the RBC, Regional Planning Commission, you need to, because they have answers as well. I want to go in a little different direction as far as take rates. We really haven't talked about that too much. We've got a provider to my immediate south, District 4 in mine, within 400 households of wiring the entire county. They stopped doing wireless several years ago. They're nothing but fiber. And 80% of what they do is aerial, basically up in the air. 20% is what they bury. They ran into a little problem with something called MoDOT, where it was more expensive to go across a MoDOT bridge than it was to literally bore under Mark Twain Lake. MoDOT has since backed away from there. They got religion. Railroads are getting to the point where they're getting religion. They have been a particular sore spot for a long time. So there are some really encouraging things happening out there. One of the more encouraging things is something happening with Lincoln University and Harris State University. And those are historically black colleges, universities in the state of Missouri. Lincoln, and I'm not sure where Lincoln's at on this, I'm going to go ahead and ask if you know, please tell us. Harris, I know for a fact, has been working on getting the federal dollars they are about to receive. I don't know the exact amount yet, but they have an opportunity to build out broadband in a very, how do I put this, depressed area as far as deserts go, where affordability is the key issue. And 15-mile radius. You draw 15 miles around Harris State University, you basically knocked out the city of St. Louis, and you've taken a significant part of North County. And what that is going to do is it's going to be a game changer for those folks. I know it's something that they're working hard on. I'm not sure, where is Lincoln County in that process? Lincoln University, excuse me.
That's okay.
Lincoln County is farther south.
Yeah, that's right, further south. Dr. Gonzalez and I actually had a conversation in the hallway the other day, so I forwarded it to our interim president to see who we need to direct that to for the bigger university. But that would also catch our opportunity zone if we could get that going on on the Lincoln campus, because you're talking about within 15 miles, we have an opportunity zone with some internet access issues, especially for the kids that weren't in school all during COVID. They were showing up at the churches and whatnot, and they need to have access to the internet so they can keep them out of trouble and keep them doing their lessons. So I will tell you, we shot that to the president to see what he's going to do with that, and he's pretty proactive, so I'm looking for something to come out of that.
And that's something else would be a game changer for Central Missouri, especially around Jefferson City, the capital. We all go there, we all know people have really bad internet in Jefferson City. It's kind of embarrassing for us as well.
This is Eliazar Gonzalez and Lincoln University too. We have been tracking different information about how to support underserved communities in the state. Currently, we are looking to get partnerships. That's why we are here, because you guys are talking about developing communities and you are going to bring infrastructure that is able to provide the capacity of the people in the community to communicate and develop businesses. We are here to support you and to help you with the education of these people. We want to help and we want to partner with you to develop that capacity.
Thank you. Mayor Turner, are you still there? Is she on mute? That's something else. The cities are also getting some federal money through ARPA. And I know a lot of them are talking wastewater treatment plants and all sorts of infrastructure that counties don't deal with. So I know that's a concern, but also lots of folks out there looking at doing broadband with the providers. Representative Veet identified a way of getting at that through the Chamber of Commerce, something a more formal process. Anybody else out there aware of any other types of programs that are being stood up around the state to deal with this issue at the county or the city level? You there?
Carrie, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. So asking about what programs might be available at the city level. I do want to say we've had a very good partnership. I know I see our county commissioners there in the audience and state reps. But we currently are working with our local chamber where we have, I think Rudy touched, I think it was Rudy a minute ago on our chamber. They've kind of spearheaded a group where they have a broadband task force. In fact, they met this week. I wasn't able to be there, but where they're getting the city and county together and some stakeholders to have these discussions so that we're all connected, because we really don't know the answers. And especially now with the state possibly and the governor talking about having resources, people are looking to the city and county to do a lot of this funding. And at the same time, I think one of our big concerns is not wanting to overlap resources and funding, because we have to be very targeted in how we do this. And then also when there's different providers, how those choices are made and resources spent. But at least in Jefferson City and Cole County, I have to give big credit to our county commissioners for working so closely with the city, that we're all working together with our chamber and entities to try to work this through, because it's not going to be successful if we're not all at the table together.
So, you guys,
It's very confusing. I'll say that much.
Any discussion as far as how much? Cindy, in one?
I couldn't hear. Was that directed to me? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
That's hearing item for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we're gonna get about $15 million in Cole County, close to $14.884 million. We just started the spreadsheet and really, it's not filled out. We know where it's gonna, the last column on the right is gonna add 14.884, but we don't know whether how much. Now we think stormwater can fit in one of the columns. We know that wastewater, drinking water, broadband, and then there's something I call soft expenses of helping people with rent or whatever utilities. There's some soft stuff. I prefer to stay in the spend money on things that will last for years rather than a month or two. Got another commissioner here that might have a different take on the east side of the county, but that's what the western side, I think, here is thinking about.
I think we've got the same answer. I've got my constituents right now that are saying, you've got it in Lawrenceville and the bigger communities and stuff where you're gonna get it to us. I don't know. Unless y'all can tell me different. I still don't know.
One of the things very important is before you plan, you have to have some idea of a plan of what it's going to cost, and then right at the piece tell you what you need to do. So saying everybody's going to give a given percentage, I think the proposal then is the chamber doing RFP and getting different companies, giving them an idea, and then we can go to the cities and explain the benefits to them, what percentage they're going to pay. But until we know what the total package is going to cost and what money is out there and sources, you're never going to get everybody to just agree to a given number.
Yeah, it's not the chambers, partnership.
That's the name of it too, is Regional Economic
Development partnership.
and
How many
Development.
stakeholders are engaged in that process, not just the commissioners, not listeners, who else, chamber, what other folks are party to this?
Well, when the chamber split off this economic partnership side, and they came to the city and to the county and asked for money, we sort of said, show us private investment that we can maybe match. So they went out and raised money. They've got a lot of folks that have pledged 50,000 a year for a number of years. So it's a really public-private partnership that's going. And it's just they've hired someone away from DED, Luke Holtschneider. He starts October 1, I think. So September 1, maybe. He'll be on board to run that entity, and they're going to be a point player on the broadband in our community.
How about Boone County? This process?
So I can't give you a dollar amount, but there is an incredible appetite for broadband here. We're still at the point of working with the city of Columbia, looking at what we're going to get exactly at the end. But I think it's much the same here.
The other county commissioners out there we haven't heard from yet?
So one example, we work with hundreds of electric co-ops throughout the whole United States. And if you want a good example of how communities, as far as county commissioners, economic development and everything, has worked together with CARES Fund, with RDOF, and to collaborate all the funding. West Virginia, Central Virginia Electric Co-op, Gary Wood, is an excellent example of coordinating all the efforts all the way from the local, all the way up to build broadband out to his whole area. We have also worked with the state of Mississippi to get their CARES Act and built thousands of miles before the December 30th deadline to get broadband to those areas. So there is examples out there that can be utilized. So that you guys are not the first people that is like, oh my gosh, we need broadband. We have examples that we're happy to share with you guys on how, and what's great about it is they can give you ideas of where the failure points were. You know, as far as legislation, as far as communication, that kind of stuff. So there is examples out there.
I've actually talked about some West Virginia, and they're really glad they're doing what they're doing. It's just, you all understand, no one state in the union has figured this out yet. If they did, we wouldn't be sitting here. We'd be copying everything they've done so far. So it's something where there's no cookie cutter approach, there's no uniform standard. Everybody has to struggle through this their own way, but their geography is worse than our geography for most of the state. And they figured this thing out. A big part of that is their mapping process, where they can get it down in real time. People don't have to ask where is it. They just show it, and it's part of the state effort to let people know where it is in real time. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There it is. And we've got that capability in Missouri now. It's just not something you do with the state. So let's see, you know.
Three kiddos I have to attend to for a first day of school, so I just wanted to leave you guys with this and the commissions as well. Being an electric co-op employee for, I'll say, a quarter of a century, the difference that I've seen in the communications business probably is this, and I tell the challenge yourselves with this: keep your expectations high. And what I mean by that is 85 years ago, some folks went out there and they put electricity. And some 55 years ago, the standard electric service in your house was 122.40. And today, 55 years later, the standard service is 122.40. And so what I tell you about that is, the federal government says 25.3 is good. And if you accept that, and we're all gonna be back in the room in 10 years, 25.3 is not gonna be accepted. And so keep your expectations high for that, that's what I mean. And don't just settle for what someone out there tells you is what's good for today, because it's a Band-Aid. Sir, you just said that, you know, I want the long term. And so those expectations have to be set high. I'm gonna tell you from a service standpoint, I know there's still entities out there today. There's some in Fulton, Missouri, that their standard practice to come and fix your internet when it's off is a week. That's not acceptable. It's not. I mean, internet, we're all here today talking about how important it is. And if your lights go out tonight, I bet you your provider comes out and turns your lights back on tonight. I bet they don't wait. I bet they don't wait a week. And so again, expectations, keep them high. Accountability. You know, Renee talked about it, an entity down in their part of the county that's supposed to be providing some type of internet service to them. That isn't today. And what I've seen again over and over and over in the communications business is there's been monies that's been given out there that you're supposed to serve these folks. And lo and behold, they're not being served. We had that in Callaway County. There's holes and entities came in, they served a few folks and left people out there to die. And that's exactly what you're gonna have if you don't hold folks accountable for the money that you give them. And so you have to make sure that if you keep those two things, I think it's fairly simple. Obviously, there has to be some money that's given out there, some subsidy to make it work. But I think your RFP, bringing folks to the table, holding them accountable, making sure the expectation is the same. I don't see it being that hard. I mean, I just really don't. But again, I know it seems like we made it a lot more complicated than what I believe it is. So with that, folks, have a great night. You guys are going to solve all the problems I can see.
To that point, as far as the requirements, we talked to a provider hearing that so far the record is 27 devices in one household. But we talked to another provider, said, well, the average is 7. Well, it's only going to increase as the Internet of Things increases. It's going to have more and more smart everything in our homes. I didn't know there was a meg for each one of the Ring cameras around the house. And oh goodness, didn't realize that was happening. But the farther we get into the 21st century, the more these things are going to take place. It's going to be more and more commonplace, more bandwidth we're going to need. So I just want to be respectful of everybody's time this evening. We got anybody else on Zoom wanting to jump in? Okay, we're all good. Anybody here who had something they wanted to say, didn't step up there with a microphone yet?
Yeah, I'm with Dave Giles from Socket, and I'm a lifelong Ashland resident here, and I just basically want to reiterate a couple things I've heard so far. One was the last argument that Chris left is, and I think that we should be treated as a utility. You know, people like Ameren, have high expectations, Ameren, Boone Electric, stuff like that. Your broadband is becoming a utility. It's not just a luxury, it's a utility, like the electricity. So the 25.3 is low, in my opinion as well. So another gentleman said, aim for the best. I think you can do that and get the best. And then to just copy off another person and reiterate what the gentleman said earlier, full attachments and easements will help. And, you know, some relief there and getting access because it's a hilly area, especially if you get closer to the river. So that type of access is going to help as well. So basically just reiterate a couple of things, but I think we can make this much better in this area.
All right, thank you. Senator Barksdale, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I mean, I just come across everything that you all come across, the census block thing is ridiculous. They tell you that that area is being served. Like I said, I just come here to see what people's thoughts and ideas are. I have a lot of constituents that don't have it, and I don't personally have high-speed internet. I live 5 miles from the state capital, and I still don't have it. And it's, I live out in an area where there's not that many houses, but I'm coming here just to find answers just like you all.
Thank you. Chuck, did you have anything? All right. Willard?
I live in eastern Morgan County. Went through years and years and years of no high-speed internet, various companies, various satellites or whatever. And I just have to mention that Como out of Tipton and Corey Tindenzel is here. I say he runs the company. His actual title is Director of Member Services, I know. But they have done an outstanding job in our area. I am not serviced by the electric cooperative itself. I have Ameren because where I live, I didn't have a choice. But Como Electric Cooperative is doing an outstanding job in our area. And part of a lot of Morgan County is rough terrain down around the lake. Go down to Graboid Mills and Lorien and hills and rocks. It's not a good place to put fiber. And they're doing it. And so my praise is just to them. In our area, they are known as a broadband provider that also provides electricity. So they're that good. So I just wanted to mention that and praise them because I love what we have.
Thank you. One Ed, do you want to jump in? What's the secret sauce?
I don't know about the secret sauce, but I know that there's a lot of people sitting around here where they include that was part of the original architecture of our system here at Como. I tell you what, the things that have been covered here tonight, we definitely agree with. The thing I just want to maybe just say is it's part of the community. We're all dedicated to this region that we live in. I know that I look around here in the crowd and I know that there's a few of you that I've talked to that are still hoping to get service. And so we will, we're committed and we're not going anywhere. We've got 80 years under our belt. And just like the other providers in this room, folks, we hear you. And we can't tell you enough how much we appreciate what's coming out of the state, what's coming out of the state broadband office. Tim is a big one-man show. And so we're going to continue to serve, continue to work with our elected officials, our county, our cities, and quite also our neighbors. So I'm just going to keep it short with that. So thank you.
I'll ask you a follow-up question. Work from anywhere, remote work, what have you. At one point, we had 45% of the state workforce out of the buildings. I actually surveyed the Office of Administration, how's it going? And got the response back was 90% or higher. Every department, folks who are working from home, love it. They love the flexibility, they love the ability to do that. The problem is not everybody can work from home. They didn't have internet connectivity. talking to some of the same folks, different contexts about what happened during the pandemic when they flipped the switch at the schools and everybody was basically home. And I was getting phone calls from folks in my district with really good internet in the city of Anvil. What's going on? You know, the spinning circle of death. I'm trying to push product out all over the planet. I can't get anything done. And he told me that 40 to 45% of all the bandwidth in the state was soaked up by 2 entities. Guess which? Netflix and YouTube. Nobody saw that coming. Nobody. We have learned a lot from this pandemic. And what we're also seeing is acceleration of folks from other places, other states. It's happening in my district because we border the People's Republic of Illinois, tax refugees, but also folks from places where lockdowns are legion. They're coming out. I'm hearing it in my neck of the woods around Mark Twain Lake. Was anecdotal at first, now we're backing up with data. As far as Lake of the Ozarks, is that something also you're seeing folks investing, saying, hey, we're going to spend the entire year here? What's the dynamic look like?
Yeah, that is the feedback we have from our businesses. And so, you know, I think there's, you know, as providers, we speak to the business equation. We have to make sure we make smart business decisions. But as regions, the multiplier effect, I think we underestimate. And, you know, we talked about this at the lake, just for instance, we got a lot of part-time homeowners and they are choosing to live in the area we all deem as important, you know, here in Missouri. And to your point, you know, this is one of the most exciting times we've probably seen generations to live in Missouri. Folks can choose to live and work here because of this technology. So there's a business case, and then there's this multiplier effect that I don't know that we've completely got our arms around what this technology is going to do for us as a state. But it's pretty exciting, and businesses are telling us people are staying longer and spend money at the restaurants, at, you know, the realtors or whatever it is. I know that that connectivity is a critical thing when you're selling homes. If you don't have connectivity, it's a big deal. So
we actually have realtors in the Walsh County area who tell us, by the way, we can't sell these houses without fiber to the home. The realtors are the ones going out and buying it. And the assessed valuation went up 5 to 7%, $7,000 per parcel all over. And county commissioners, if you want to raise your tax base, your revenues without raising taxes, how do we do that? We add value to the property. How do we do that? We add fiber to the home. So that's something we're seeing that play out all over the state. We're talking to people all over the place. That dynamic is something that's solid, and we would like to see that accelerate. Before we close out, I'm going to ask our state reps up front if we got any other concluding comments, and if there's anything else from folks out here, I'll grab the microphone yet.
No, I don't have anything other than I'll say thank you all for coming. It's an education for me, and hopefully you pick up something on it. Oh, shut up.
I just, if you don't need to, I want to thank Mr. Conley for letting us use the school.
Anytime, folks.
And closing early, you know this man has. So.
No, it's an honor and a pleasure. Anytime, anything I can do that says, I'll never hesitate. Chuck's got my number.
Should we? We're good. All right, well, we'll go ahead and again, I want to thank NLRPC for itself, the Zoom room. Thank you for coming out this evening. Be safe, and hopefully we'll get to Friday and real soon. Thank you.
Can we help you put things back? No, sir. You're fine. You're fine. Actually, I've got a meeting on Thursday, so I just keep things here. We're not in session yet, so it's good. Wow.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. For your school, just added this. We're constantly under construction. My middle school, it's got a $13 million bond issue as we speak. 30,000 square foot addition, so big renovation system. Buildings. It's just really exciting watching Columbia come down to you. We got this fly up the board. At the zoo, 84, probably. That's just basically double since I was here. 30 years. Ashland was 2008. Yes, it's like you went to all my size. It's just like it's supposed to grow.
Yes.
You're equidistant between Jeff and Columbia.
Yep.
You got no crime. You got lower. And you got great schools, which
Yes.
is like, for my district, it's not mine, because it's equidistant, sure. And the houses, wait, you don't see a for sale sign in the yard, here, you auction them up for cash.
Yep.
And it's like the asking price, you can right past that, first 30 seconds. Right.
It is.
So I'm gonna list, like I said, 75.
Hey, Lou.
Okay.